It's now time for our first keynote presentation of the summit, ladies and gentlemen, brought to you by major sponsor, Australian Unity. We'll hear from our various generous sponsors about how they're applying the art of disruption to their businesses, residents, and to their clients. Let's hear now from Charmaine Waugh, General Manager, Residential Communities Victoria at Australian Unity, on what innovation or invention will be the big game changer for retirement living over the next 3 years.
Australian Unity is in a position where they're consulting with the next generation of customers to understand what they are after in the retirement living space. We are designing an end-to-end property and service proposition to ensure that we are positioning ourselves to meet the demands and the needs of this next generation.
Thank you, Charmaine. Now, just a quick reminder that you are very welcome to ask questions during all the keynotes and presentations using those roving mics or with the SMS ability. To introduce our opening keynote speaker and moderate the Q&A session that will follow, please welcome to the stage the Executive General Manager, Residential Communities at Australian Unity, Suzanne Dvorak. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you for the introduction, Kay. I'd like to start by acknowledging and paying my respect to the traditional Aboriginal people of the Gold Coast and their descendants. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today on behalf of Australian Unity and be a major sponsor of such an important event for our sector. The next 2 days are a prime opportunity for us all to come together, discuss key issues and explore new strategies for inspiring health and wellbeing, ensuring the next generation of retirees get the very best possible village experience. As we all know, the theme of this year's conference is the art of disruption. We've heard the word disruption a lot since Clayton Christensen's famous 1995 Harvard Business Review article introduced the term to the mainstream market. Christensen, who some refer to as the father of disruption theory, is known for saying, "Motivation is a catalyzing ingredient for every successful innovation. The same is true for learning." I'm very confident that over the next hour, we will both learn and be motivated thanks to the experience of today's speaker. Shirlee Sharkey is both a pioneer and a futurist. And it's this kind of multi-directional thinking that has made her and St Elizabeth leaders in the Canadian healthcare realm. Through her leadership, the organisation has enjoyed exponential growth and expansion throughout Canada, the United States and beyond. Nationally celebrated and locally cherished, St Elizabeth's staff of 9,000 spreads hope and happiness through people-powered care, delivering 18,000 visits daily. As Canada's largest social enterprise and a successful not-for-profit, St Elizabeth works collaboratively to tackle tough problems, catalyse new solutions and deliver impact. Shirlee's personal commitment to community advancement is evident in her leadership and involvement on many boards ranging from health to education. She is a sought-after speaker and a frequent contributor to Canada's premier national newspapers, The Globe and The Mail. Internationally recognised, Shirlee is also a respected and influential leader in the global innovation community. Today, Shirlee will be sharing with us her experience in dealing with disruption over the last 25 years at St Elizabeth, including the many changes in consumer expectations, service delivery and housing choices. I understand that Toronto is experiencing the same housing price and cost of living pressures as major Australian cities, so Shirlee's shared experiences will be very prescient for us all here today. So without further ado, please put your hands together and give a very warm welcome to Shirlee Sharkey.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everybody. How are you? Thank you so much, Suzanne, for that very kind introduction. It's also a real pleasure to be here with you. Beyond the warm temperature, it's amazing because I came from snow and rain. I've really felt the warmth of so many Australians who've helped me, welcomed me, but most importantly, told me the best place to get coffee. And I'm thrilled to see how serious you all are about your coffee, because this is one of the many things that I think Canadians and Aussies have in common. So with the ocean literally right in front of us, it's a fitting metaphor that the digital age is, yes, hitting us like a tidal wave. The new technologies and the innovations are hitting the market daily. I was amazed just last week. I had someone come for an hour to talk to me just about new innovations and gadgets that now exist. And it was a full hour with just new products and services. So I begin to think sometimes it's sink, swim, surf, or perhaps it's time to, in fact, order up that on-demand helicopter. And many days I feel more like I need the helicopter. So let's look at innovation. And I would say today, everybody is talking about innovation. CEOs, companies, many people are moving into organizations with titles as innovation seekers, innovation gurus. But I sometimes worry, now that everything is about innovation, that possibly nothing really is. So we have to watch that. But from my point of view, innovation is defined in a myriad of ways. But it really is a process, and it's a mindset, and a way to, in fact, solve a problem or to solve problems. And a common pitfall of innovation is that we spend far too much time focusing on idea generation. And that's something that St. Eliz certainly experienced during our innovation journey. And you don't spend enough time really trying to understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve. And by skipping to these solutions, we many times end up with answers that actually don't even hit the problem head on. And the problems in our space that are all about human services and all about the aging population, they're complex. And they do take time to understand and what I would call unpack the problems of what we're talking about. And if we simply jump to solutions, they simply will not be as robust as they possibly could be in this space. So if I leave you today with any important message about innovation, focus more on the problem you're trying to solve versus the interest in the technology or the gadget that we're thinking about. So today, if innovation is the word of the day, then certainly disruptive innovation is the next buzzword. And this, in my mind, is an organization where I thought it would be helpful to discuss disruptive innovation is how we've looked at it from a business model as an organization. Because there's many forms of disruptive innovation that could be from process innovation to social innovation to things designed very differently. But from really a business model, I think it's very interesting as we look at how do we change up our organizations to be more what I call future-proofed. You know, this is a business model that many organizations use, and St. Eliz has used this to really help provide the structure of understanding a business plan that's necessary to bring focus for your organizations. And why I like it is it actually strips down the very foundation and the building blocks of our organizations. You look at your resources, your partnerships, your customers, your channels. And it's from this starting point that you're able to, in fact, see where you can sharpen your focus. What's good about this being on a canvas is that it's literally one page that is putting sometimes the abstract concept of a business strategy in a new direction literally on one page that gives that transparency for everyone and gives the focus. And I'm finding more and more in our space when there are some abstract ideas, the more we can actually put them into some concrete image like a canvas or I was in Copenhagen, and they were doing some design thinking for 2050 and the future of 2050. And what they had done is put this whole concept literally and figuratively in a cubicle. And what it helped do is put sometimes our thinking into something that's much more understandable and concrete. So the next time you're trying to look at sort of how can we change our business and innovate in an effective way, this is a really good process so that you really do understand all the building blocks that you have. You know, another key element for us at St. Eliz that has helped us be successful in innovation is asking good questions. And this is sometimes very challenging when we have the speed of come up with a solution. Here's a problem. Come on, make it happen. What are we going to do? And what we've really said is let's just pause for a minute and have us think about, well, what can we imagine that's different here? What can we move around that we haven't thought about? You know, what can we interconnect? Or in fact, what maybe could we use differently? And you know, asking these good questions allows, in my mind, sort of new pathways to open up and to have us think differently. I'm going to share a story. Do you use weed whackers here in Australia? Weed whackers, you know, you pull them and you clear your weeds. Typically with weed whackers, yeah? No? Yes? Yes, nod? Say yes, no? No? Well, the weed whackers, you pull this and then it whacks all the weeds, just as it says. So invariably, weed whackers do not start, and you have to keep pulling them. Always, every spring, every summer, you go through this process. So typical to form. My husband and I were in the garage trying to start this thing and pulling it, and it wouldn't start. And we're going into a variety of different conversations about the problem with the weed whacker. And then my daughter came out because of the ruckus of what was occurring in the garage and said, well, why don't you guys turn it upside down? Maybe the gasoline will go to it better if you turn it upside down. And like we both sort of looked at each other and said, like, is she nuts? Turn this thing upside down. But when we did, that's when we were able to see the primer. And then that was the game changer to get the weed whacker to start. And it's funny, I wrote a whole article about the weed whacker and creative thinking and asking questions. And everyone thought, well, how bizarre is that, to be using the analogy of a lawn sort of equipment to what you do in healthcare. But it's those types of activities that stop you for a moment. A new person comes up with a new question for you. Then you actually think about it, and it opens your eyes to new possibilities. And many times, that's what innovation, and in particular, destructive or disruptive, it could be destructive too with the weed whacker, but disruptive innovation can really happen in that space. So it's been said that the 21st century is more about elegant integration than invention. And Singularity came up with that concept. Singularity is a university in San Francisco, San Diego, looking at all new exponential changes in healthcare, in medicine, in the economy. But a good example of this elegant integration, for me, is when I looked at Uber. And I was surprised to know that all of the technology in Uber, in fact, none of it is proprietary. That they created something that's very transformative using all of the existing tools and technologies that exist today. And I think, you know, another good analogy for this is Lego blocks, and using all of the Lego building blocks to, in fact, really make sure that you use all of these blocks similar to the business, really, model canvas. And if you're able to use them creatively, then in fact, absolutely, everything happens that's awesome. And I was talking to an author who wrote about the Lego story, and it was David Robertson, whose book is Brick by Brick. It tells the story of Lego and how, in fact, the Lego building blocks presented some very interesting challenges for them as a business over time, because they kind of steered away from all of these sort of opportunities and were not really getting the success in their change company. Then came back to really being very creative with all of the blocks that exist, and are really now, very much now, on the rise with success. So let me just circle this conversation around what I think are sort of the 3 key things for successful innovation that I have learned over time. First and foremost, focus on the problem. And it's very easy to get distracted in other areas, but focus on the problem you're trying to solve. Secondly, ask really good questions and have people from the outside come in to challenge you and ask those questions. And then thirdly, creatively use all of the building blocks that are available to you. So for context now, I wanted to really give you some real life examples and talk to you about the journey that St. Elizabeth has experienced in this whole innovation space. And it's interesting, I want to give you just a little bit of our background so that when I describe 3 of the initiatives that we've worked through with innovation, you can understand how they've made sense for us as an organization and hopefully translate them into your world and all of the challenges and opportunities that you experience. So just a little history. Our roots do go back to 1908, and in fact, next year we're going to be celebrating our 110th anniversary. And we started with really 4 nurses who, in fact, helped deliver babies in their homes in Toronto, Canada. Now, a lot of people have said, I've been a long time at St. Eliz, and I actually had someone interview me the other day and say, well, you started in 1908, correct? And I was like, no, I've been here 25 years, but not since 1908. But I said, thank you, I think, for the compliment. But it really shows that, you know, a lot of what we are all about throughout all of this time is really bringing healthcare to people and bringing it to them, in fact, where they are, and very much when they need it, and how they want it. And that's really been, I think, our whole orientation to why we need to constantly be changing up and looking for new opportunities. And we think of our work as happening at the intersection, and this will be very similar to you, of people and their everyday life. Because much of our work is done in the community and in people's homes and in many areas outside of the acute hospital space, it presents us with a very different starting point. And that I say to people, once you know one individual, their family, and the care that we provide, that's exactly what you know, is one individual. Because every home is different, every family is different, the pets, the furniture, the resources that are available. It really creates a very different living lab for all of us to provide care and to experience care. And we have found that the more we have actually freed up our mobile workers, that's in fact when the magic has happened, to create new things and new interventions. And because what we do truly intersects with the lives of people, that's why we've been forced over the years to really be absolutely creative, to make sure the care is personalized and customized, because that's the only way we know we're going to have an impact with people and be helpful in their healthcare journey. So some people say, well, St. Eliz was brilliant to figure this out. And I go, well, it's actually because of the environment and the space that we were in that we had to learn those types of competencies. And now it's very interesting that many retirement homes, long-term care facilities, and hospitals are partnering with us because they want to understand that orientation that really is all about people and their lives, and the fact that we're intersecting in their lives, not the other way around. We're very passionate about, in fact, our talent, knowing that, I was saying the other night to someone that if we really think we're controlling what's happening in an organization, we're delusional, because it is all taking place at the front line. And so we really have to be and careful and think through how do we really inspire our talent and engage with them. And we even wrote and recorded a St. Elizabeth song, and it's on YouTube, so I'm not going to torch you with it today. But it was really amazing that, in 8 hours, we were able to write and produce and sing this incredible song. I mention it because it is a reflection of, in fact, who we are, and that our staff was actually willing to express themselves. Nobody was a professional singer or playing a musical instrument, but they were able to express themselves and their values in this remarkably creative way. And I mean, just the title of our song was, "We Believe in a World Where Everyone Matters." And it was probably in all of my years, that particular day, I actually had goosebumps when I really watched the happiness, the excitement, the inspiration that people had. And it was interesting to see how could we really bottle that and really get success from that. So over the years, our world has changed. And in fact, our company has grown. I was saying to someone that when I started, we had 300 employees in a small area of Toronto. And yes, it's interesting that with that growth and expansion, we too have changed our sense of purpose. 10 years ago, we saw ourselves as a phenomenal knowledge and care exchange company. Our focus was on harnessing wisdom, knowledge leaders, and diversification. Does that sound familiar? And at that time, that was the strategy that we needed. And although we're still using those core principles today, we have changed the why of what we do, which is very unusual in the healthcare space when people say, so what it is that, what do you actually do? And we go, we spread hope and happiness. And that in itself is a very innovative way to describe what you do, rather than to say, well, we have physician services and nursing and rehab and take care of people. When you really get down to it, we spread hope and happiness. And this shifted our focus and all that we do to a higher purpose, because it was no longer about our products and our services. Really, it was about making a dent in the universe. And this beacon of hope and happiness really impacted our business strategy. And this really helped us position and understand ourselves as a social enterprise. And, I spent a great deal of time trying to explore the concepts around shared value, how to run a successful business, yes, but it can be beautifully complemented with a social purpose. And, we were very, passionate about creating this movement and having it occur both inside our organization and beyond ourselves. And what we did recently, we gave all of our staff $25. We had all of our staff go to the cinemas throughout Canada and broadcasted a whole event. And while they were all sitting there, we emailed them $25 and said, you can spend it any way you want. Pay it forward, and in fact, provide acts of kindness to family and friends that you have. And we saw it as a way to help others and to help amplify what our strengths were as a culture. And, these are sort of very important elements to the culture in an organization that's necessary if you really want to move into success in the innovation space. You have to really pave the runway that legitimizes what you're trying to do and recognizes people and their strengths. And that's why I've spent a little bit of time to really explain to you a lot of the journey of St. Eliz and what we're all about. Because now, when we move into the examples, I hope you will see how they're in a very different context than how we typically sometimes look at a problem, a solution, and success. So I'm going to now move into a little bit about some examples that illustrate the problems we were trying to solve, the building blocks that we used, and in fact, how we were able to bridge this to new innovations and to new solutions. So our first problem as an organization many years ago, the market was becoming open and we had to compete for all of our work, especially in the home care space, which at that time was a very large % of our work. There was a lot of pressure to have the price down, the value up, and a lot of changing expectations. So we knew innovation had to be a part of the culture of St. Eliz and what we were all about. Yes, that was me 20 years ago. You can tell my life cycle based on the color of my hair over this time. But 20 years ago, we created what was called an idea factory. I had gone down, and I think I was the smallest healthcare organization in the world that went down to Silicon Valley to see what they were doing with innovation. I came back and said, everybody, I know how we have innovation. We're creating an idea factory. We're buying IKEA furniture, and this is it. We've got it made. We know exactly what we're doing in the innovation space. And, it was, a great opportunity for us to, in fact, begin to have innovation be part of our genes, but we were a bit, unsophisticated and thought that it was all about the physical space and how to use this effectively. And, we have, in fact, today now looked at innovation in a very different way and created what we've called our innovation showcase. And I want you to take a look at the video that we have and how we put it all together. I hope you can see how this showcase now, I think, reflects how we have matured beyond simply looking at innovation from a space point of view in what we do to the impact it has, and in particular related to social needs and problems, obviously because of our whole social enterprise mindset. And we're trying to deal with issues like family caregivers, our First Nations community, and building on education and end-of-life care. I'm going to move now to just two other quick examples for you. In terms of asking the right questions and using the building blocks, a good example of how we approach this at St. Eliz was through crowdsourcing. And we utilized a digital platform that was called Soapbox, and it allowed all of our employees to provide input and idea generation, and everyone was allowed to get involved in the innovation process and create a framework where the best ideas were able to rise to the surface. So anyone could get on their phone, actually get the app, put an idea in, and the entire organization was able to see what everyone was communicating about. I'll tell you, it was a little courageous because initially I thought, whoa, this is going to be fun. But we really were able to seek all kinds of input and ideas from our staff in a very, very sort of innovative and interesting way. One of the things we asked our staff were, what are your ideas about new services and ways to connect with, in fact, people? And this leads me to my next example. Our journey dates back to the 1990s, when in fact the problem we were trying to solve here was how do we bring care to people in a cost-effective way, and how do we actually have better outcomes for that? And yes, this is 15 years ago, we created what was called WOW Wound Care, Web of Wisdom. Kind of interesting, kind of funny when you look back at an early intervention to where it is today. And it was an approach where we were trying to use digital photography to, in fact, expedite the treatment, and allowed nurses and doctors to actually document the healing. And we were also able to have specialized wound therapists respond to this in a virtual way. Now, in retrospect, it was an amazing product. We were kind of ahead of our time. The business case all made sense, but the funding never followed for us. And it was one of those things that we learned, in fact, hurry up and wait. And what we today have evolved as we look at all of our opportunity in sort of the digital age and in innovation is that we're bringing all of our building blocks together into a comprehensive and integrated strategy, and also on an integrated platform. And as you can see from the slide, it includes all elements of care and technology in one sort of neat little package. But with this initiative, we're very much still ahead of the curve, which, brings me to some of the challenges that we look at with innovation and being ahead of the game, and how to, in fact, deal with timing, which is everything. And in innovation theory, how that's called the adoption curve. How many of you are in the market to buy a new car or truck? Show of hands. Nobody drives here in Australia? The big challenge now is for people to say, do we wait for the electric cars to take hold, or do we go and just buy the gas guzzler and go that route? And a lot of people are sort of immobilized, and they're sort of just saying, we're going to wait and see. And actually, I had shared this story because we're trying to decide we need a new truck. So it's, do we get the electric? Do we get weight, etc.? And then that evening, Elon Musk has the driverless trucks that are now out. And I thought, well, we've missed that completely. But it's that space of sort of, how do we keep investing? How do we wait for that wave to get to the point of success where we can ride it? And how do we make sure we don't bankrupt our companies as we're investing in this area? And that's an important lesson, I think, within innovation, to know the timing, to know when to quit and when to move forward based on this whole sort of opportunity that sometimes just doesn't magically happen, but it's over a period of time, and how to stay ahead of that. My last example, but for me, the one that I probably feel sort of most excited about is, in fact, the evolution of our consumer-driven or self-service model in the home care space. And, the problem for us was that, in fact, a provider-centric approach to care, we knew, just was not keeping up with where consumers are and what they're looking for. So let me again do a little history and then where we are today. About 20 years ago, we developed this concept called e-care, and it was in the very early days of the internet. And it was designed to be a virtual place for actually patients and families to receive education online. And once we developed the site, we decided to, in fact, provide resources to our staff in the same way. And what was interesting, this actually led to the creation of a whole suite of e-learning and knowledge products. But it morphed away from the patient and family, and instead, all of these initiatives were actually for the health professionals. And it was an interesting observation for us because we thought, well, this was the beginning all about patients and care, and instead, the readiness just wasn't there. And our health professionals had to embrace and experience e-learning first. And it was, again, a great lesson for us on adaptability and innovation and being prepared to morph and change that around. So here today is our Eliz, and that's E-L-I-Z-Z. And it's our direct-to-consumer brand that's really dedicated to all things for caregivers. Now, its genesis was part of a much larger diversification strategy at St. Eliz. And the more obvious route would have been for us to really improve our private home care services for people. That's what our competitors were doing. You know, however, we pivoted to focus on the caregiver, not necessarily the patient. And this turned out to be a key strategic decision for us. We've done a lot of research in the field to figure out that it's a growing unmet need. 1 in 3 Canadians, in fact, are caregivers. I'm sure it's similar here in Australia. 75% of the workforce are facing rising levels of distress based on caregivers. Another key decision we had with Eliz was to position it actually outside of healthcare and put it into the context of the social mainstream. And we didn't set out to actually digitize the services, but because we wanted to connect the caregiver very early in the journey, well before they had caregiver burnout or were experiencing the distress that so many caregivers have at sort of the last end of activity and services with their loved ones. We wanted this information much sooner for them, and we wanted them to be able to manage that more effectively. So we created something that was much more of a consumer look and feel. It used simple and plain language, easy user experience, mobile, social connectivity, interactive, and a do-it-yourself. And we wanted it to be kind of inspirational. Probably the best compliment I got with the product when we were doing focus groups, we had a young gentleman, sort of in his early 30s, who was a caregiver for his father. And I said, how do you find this product? How do you find this whole experience with Eliz? He said, I'm just so glad you don't have pictures of people in cardigans and with the hands that are folded. And that was the best compliment for me because it helped me realize we've mainstreamed this. And in fact, he said, I'm going to call this the Oprah of caregiving. And I thought, oh my God, we're going to be billionaires now. Finally, we've been labeled as Oprah as one of the best compliments. But since 2015, we've engaged and supported over 3.5 million family caregivers across Canada and around the world. And yes, in Australia, we have 3,000 users on our site using Caregivers. And you can see we really have created 5 stages of caregiving that are from the early on helping right through to closing, which is, at all different forms of the caregiving journey for people. So as I close, I hope that I've inspired you just a little, and I look forward to meeting so many of you and hearing about your experiences. I don't think there is a magic solution for what we're trying to do in the innovation space anywhere, but I think if, in fact, we begin and end with what people are all about, then we're simply going to be on the right track. And I'll leave you with this last image. Sometimes the best solutions come together when we bring people together. We allow space to not only open our minds, but open our hearts, and then simply turn things upside down, just like the umbrella. Thank you very much. Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure.
It's now your turn to ask some really good questions.
and we have some roving mics going around the room if you would like to put your hand up. If not, you can SMS to the number that's hopefully on the screen. If not, it's the one that was given to you earlier. But whilst we're waiting for that, if I can just ask you, with 9,000 people on your team, that's a lot of people, how do you manage to keep such a large organisation agile and ready to respond to disruption?
It's a great question, and that's why so much of what I talked about was the passion we have to engage our staff. And we really come up with some wild and crazy ideas. I mean, the $25 was just a bizarre concept where we said, how do we signal to people that they're so important to us and that they're valuable to us? And that they have the freedom to do what they always do. So simple things like that that are very big things. To constantly be thinking that our talent is not a means to a bigger end, but sometimes it's the end in itself. And then in particular now in our environments where we're not able to control and regulate, even though many governments feel we can regulate the health space. In my mind, it's really if we can ensure every patient interaction is a positive one, and then our role as leaders is to create the tools, technology, and environment to make it happen. And it's a job that never finishes.
Yes, I can imagine. We have an SMS question here. What role specifically do you see machine learning and artificial intelligence playing in your organisation in the next 5 years?
A lot. And we're actually just now trialing out a chatbot, which is for mental health individuals, in particular adolescents, that are chatting to a computer and responding to their issues in sort of being accessible 24/7. What we're doing is working with this company. It's called Tests for Text, T-E-X-T, and Tests. And we now have our caregivers who are texting through this chat box, or a computer-assisted response, to help them with their stress and their needs that are existing. And through this piloting, obviously the chat box is learning and understanding how to be responding to the stress of caregivers. I think we're going to see more and more of this, but I say to everybody, it's but one piece in a whole array of activities that people require. And we have to look at why we're creating certain things. With AI, I mean, a lot of the creations of AI in sort of treatment and intervention is because you want something that works for people, they're accustomed to texting, or it's something that from the business model, it can be done much more effectively. You know, a lot of times, and it goes back to what's the problem we're solving, we jump into AI because it sounds interesting and neat, but it may not necessarily be accommodating what the problem is at all. Why this was so compelling for me and makes sense, I met the two young gentlemen when I was down with exponential medicine, and they'd created this approach. And it was, I thought if we can save one adolescent's life from suicide through this approach, then it's well worth it. Because right away we had all the naysayers. Oh, these are mental health conditions, and who's responding, and all the typical risk-averse health approach to things. And then I just said, you know, if one individual we can save their life, then this is a good initiative. So that's just a small example that we're working with today. I would say we're going to see more and more of this, but it has to be put into what I call the whole ecosystem of treatment and approach.
Up the back.
Shirley, Judy Martin from Sage. I've been to St Elizabeth 3 times now, taking groups of Australian executives.
Yes.
I've never had anyone leave without going, wow. So the models that you've implemented have been well received by a lot of Australian executives. My question is, you've been CEO for 25 years, you've gone from 300 staff to over 9,000. What is the approach for St Elizabeth for attracting, retaining and retention of staff and bringing them onto the wonderful culture that you've had when you've got that many staff spread over all of Canada and especially into your remote First Nations area? Mm-hmm. So how do you attract staff and keep them when we're in an industry that are crying out for staff?
It's a great question. Internally, we've put in place a very comprehensive, what we call Leadership Edge program. And it's very extensive. It costs a lot of money and time. But our thinking is, if we don't identify the leaders of tomorrow and put them through very sort of effective support programs and mentorship, it doesn't just happen. And I was convinced 2 or 3 years ago that this was the direction we needed to go into with our continued growth, is to figure out inside the organization how to develop the leadership that exists. So that's sort of inside, and that's just one program of many, many initiatives. Externally, what we've really been doing is differentiating ourselves. And this whole concept of a social enterprise is actually very compelling. And we've been able to recruit. On our leadership team now, I don't think I have, all the 4 new recruits have come completely outside of healthcare. Engineering, banking, and one came from selling beer. And I said, if you can market and sell beer, then I'm convinced you're going to help us in our field. But it's bringing the outside in and maintaining the wonderful resources we have. You know, I do a lot of work also at the universities to recruit the up and rising stars in the MBA programs and the health programs. So it's a combination of many approaches and really differentiating ourselves in a meaningful way, and to truly kind of put some of our money where our mouth is, to how we in fact support our staff and what we do. Because if you're not authentic with it, you'll be found out real fast. And it'll be, you know, what's this all about? You know, I understand Australians are cynical. Well, Canadians are too. And if there's sort of, you know, something that doesn't look right, they'll pick it out right away. So a lot of it is to also be very authentic and true with what you're saying.
Thank you. Further SMS question. What is the financial model for residents at St. Elizabeth's or Canada generally? Is there government support and do they pay an entry fee?
Ooh, that could be a whole morning conversation. But in the home care space, home care is outside of our Canada Health Act. Our Canada Health Act, which is the universal coverage in Canada, our tax base pays for hospital service and physician services. So you're not able to go outside of the system and sort of purchase things privately, and it's universal throughout the country. So independent of your financial means, you get access to hospital care and physician services. Everything else is kind of a little bit of a dog's breakfast of where it fits. That the government funds some programs like home care, but they're limited and there's eligibility and assessment. Long-term care, some of it is covered, but hotel fees aren't, and there's means tests. The retirement community is really open in the market for individuals to purchase, but there are some regulations in that space. So it's the, I think, traditional issue where our origins were hospitals and physicians, and now with chronic disease and a whole different orientation to the community and people in their lives, there's quite a challenge, because most people want to go into the hospital because then they're not burdened necessarily with any financial means, versus really staying in the community or in other areas. So it's quite a mixture of activity that exists. In home care primarily, the acute care services are pretty much government funded. Anything that then moves into more longer term chronic care and management and healthier communities kind of falls outside of that, and then some of it fits into the insurance realm too. So quite a mixture of activity, which I think is very similar to many other countries, with the dominance being and starting with the acute hospital space. And that's been the challenge for now many, many years, to turn that power sort of fiefdom upside down.
Thank you. Has St. Elizabeth's tried to quantify and measure the social value that its organisation contributes to the community?
Yeah, that's a great question. Our annual report actually is all about what outcomes we've achieved in the social value proposition. So go on our site. I didn't bring any. In the age of digital space, plus I only do carry-on luggage is really the real reason behind that. We have all of these wonderful sort of annual reports that are really St. Eliz impact reports. But go on our site and you'll be able to see how, in fact, we are demonstrating what we're creating within our impact. So it's really our impact report versus what you would typically have as your financial reports, that we've really turned that around and are measuring what we're doing in 6 areas of impact, ranging from end of life to enabling communities and many things in between. So certainly take a look at that.
And do you have programs to support carers, or is this inbuilt to all your care programs to care recipients?
I think it's built into kind of all of our programs, but we have, the Eliz is our entire sort of caregiver program. That's everything from education right through to services for caregivers or services for their loved one. I'm not sure I fully understand that question, but I think by answering that, our Eliz is actually this whole digital model of providing support for the carers. In addition, when we actually provide home care services to us, we have a lot of that we would call ongoing support to the caregiver, but not in the same digital format as our Eliz product.
And how does the regulatory environment in Canada operate to support or hinder disruptive innovation?
It's the same everywhere. Long-term care space is the most highly regulated area in Canada. I was seconded to do work in the long-term care space a couple of years ago, and I couldn't believe it. I thought home care had a lot of sort of standards and expectations, but long-term care, I think we had 500 standards that are yearly. There's compliance and officers and going around, and sort of long-term care would be our nursing home space. Our retirement homes did not have regs, and they, in the last couple of years, did establish some, and they're much better. They're more enabling regs, and home care has more standards. I would say the funding model and funding models have been the real challenge to really get innovation to have the scale and size so that you can actually get the business and get the new way of doing things happening. Because when you don't have the funding, all of these concepts are amazing, but if it doesn't follow with where are you going to get the money and the revenue, it's very difficult. And our private pay market, I would say, is still very small throughout the country. So you really have to work with all of the various government-funded initiatives in addition to augmenting that with private pay. But generally speaking, big problem is scaling these initiatives and getting funding and having our procurement models design the kind of bundled care and episodes of care that then allow providers to bring forth their new innovative solutions. We spend now several million of our own resources trying to get ahead of that curve well before we've figured out where the funding model is going to come from.
I suspect that leads into our next question, which is how do you set a budget for innovation? Is it absorbed into OPEX, or is it a percentage of cash flow profit?
It's a little bit of both. We actually do build our operating plan and put a big element of what I would call our operational staff and resources in the operating plan that have to be accommodated through our business model. Some of our evaluation and programs where we are trying to experiment and look at new innovative models of care that we know we're going to have difficulty securing funding, what we do is use our surplus to invest in those areas that we would call research, evaluation, and innovation. So we do it in both ways.
And can you tell us more about your choice to do e-learning? How do you replicate the benefits of being able to network, which is a benefit of in-person training? Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, for us it was quite easy to understand how e-learning was going to be effective because all of our staff, direct staff, the majority are mobile. They are out there. So we had to figure out how do we get the tools at their fingertips. And so we moved into e-learning, or our product is called At Your Side Colleague, very, very early on. And then what we found with our First Nations communities, we were doing a lot of traditional workshops where they would fly us up to very remote areas, and it would cost a fortune for everybody. And then I said, well, why aren't we simply using our e-learning products and maybe bringing in some community development staff to help bridge both the e-learning in addition to the community development work. So now we're in well over 3/4 of all of our First Nations communities. By being in the communities, I mean they are using our e-learning products and initiatives. In addition, we've hired community development staff in all of those communities to help with the uptake. So again, you need to have a combination of, in my mind, virtual learning in addition to direct. But again, you go back to what is the problem we're trying to solve. And I think it's interesting, where hospitals were the first to say, we're going to have e-learning. And I go, well, everybody's here. So why do you need to have e-learning? Versus areas where people are more mobile, it makes a whole lot of sense. And I found the same thing with telemedicine or telecare, that people were coming into the clinic and they were doing telecare from the clinic to the doctor's office, literally like maybe 100 yards down the corridor. And I was like, I don't know if this is making sense, versus going back to some of the remote areas and the accessibility that you need with telecare. So again, a lot of it, we get sometimes mesmerized by the opportunity and lose sight of what we're really trying to accomplish and what impact we're really trying to have with whether it's a learner or whether it's an individual and their family.
This last question seems to have quite a lot of energy behind it and a lot of punctuation marks, so read passion behind it. Why did you decide to solve all your problems in-house? I understand you built an IT team to build solutions in-house. Is this right? If so, did you save money in the long term?
Okay, I would say no. Many of our problems were not done in-house. Many have been done in partnerships and with other groups. We do have a huge IT group, but a lot of that is using many solutions with other companies that we've worked with. Most of our IT team is really just helping us with the maintenance and what we call keeping the lights on, or keeping the smartphones on, or keeping the tablets working. We are a real believer in outsourcing and bringing the outside in, bringing the inside out. In my mind, it's fundamental. And as strange as it is, we actually provide a great deal of managed services to smaller not-for-profit agencies where they are outsourcing the work to us in the traditional forms of management, service, finance, etc. But I think absolutely, in the spirit of innovation, there has to be an openness to bring the outside in. No organization can possibly hire enough people and the right people to help with all of the new ideas and experimentation that needs to take place. So if this is a vendor looking for some work, come and contact me. I'm ready and willing to outsource anything that makes any sense.
We only have about a minute and a half left, but there is another hopeful question here, so I'm going to just ask you to answer it quickly if you can. What was your most effective way to bring your culture of hope and happiness to 9,000 staff and get buy-in at the front line?
Popcorn in the cinemas. Changing it up. Typically healthcare, it's so traditional and risk averse, and changing it up, even for us to have sort of home team huddle and try to figure out how to do that throughout Canada. That's why we had everyone go into cinemas, because you have a good time at the show. Some of it is in signaling. Some of it is in really having a track record of what you're trying to do and carrying through with that. And that does take courage sometimes, because you're going to make mistakes along the way, very significant mistakes, and you got to learn and not do it again. It is, I think, challenging to look at how to inspire people and to figure out a way to do that virtually, day to day. With us, it's a lot of sharing stories. It's a lot of, quite frankly, it boils down to respecting each and every one. And that sounds like something so simple, but at times it can be remarkably complicated with how we have to sort of be leaders and be successful in the health space. So
That's all we have time for today.
excellent, great questions, everybody. Wow. Yeah. You had one. How do you access a Liz? You simply go on aliz.com and there you are. And the first question it's going to ask you is, how are you feeling today? So it'll be about you as caregivers versus typically when we are a caregiver, they always ask your loved one, how are you feeling? So this is a change up to say, how are all of you feeling today? And it's totally accessible to anyone. So you're welcome to go on site and use it. And call up Oprah and tell her it's really good.
Thank you for sharing your time, wisdom, and hope with us today.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Suzanne, and thank you, Shirley, for generously sharing your insights with us.